Hi, I'm Jay Leeming, and this is the Crane Bag Podcast, like a secret word used by a badger to praise the full moon. Today we're going to explore a story in which the merciless but necessary energy of the sun must be counteracted by a long journey in stone shoes. Once upon a time, there was a family that lived in the forest. A mother, a father, a boy, and a girl. And this boy and this girl grew up with the music of that place in their bones. All around them always was the whisper of the wind in the branches of the trees, was the sound of the birds in those trees, was the sound of the squirrels and the rabbits and the foxes barking on the hills at night, and the patterns, the movements, the rhythms of the sun, the moon, and the stars, and the music of the seasons changing one into the other. All of this was around them, magical and beautiful and harmonious. They had that wisdom deep in their bones. And time moved forward as time does. Days become weeks, became years. None of us are born standing still. The ball of this world rolls downhill and becomes something else. Apples become cider, seeds become trees, winds blow, and they move the leaves of the trees down to the forest floor, where they crackle and dry up and become covered with winter's snow. So time passes, and time did pass in this story. And that boy became a young man, and that girl became a young woman. And this young man in particular, he got to know the language of that forest very well. And he became an excellent hunter, for he knew the language of that place, the dappled, shadowed language that speaks out of the trees and the rocks and the lichen and the moss of that forest. So he went every day into that forest. When the sun rose, he could be found there, and his arrows went from his bow right to the heart of the deer and the birds, and the squirrels and the rabbits. Anything he chose to hunt, he hunted and killed and brought home for his family to eat. And so his family lived well in that beautiful forest. But there came a day when the sun rose at the edge of the sky and gave its light to the world, its luminous, beautiful light. And that young man did not rise up. He did not get up. He was sound asleep. His sister looked at him in the bed. She tried to wake him up after a while, but he could not be awoken. After a while, she called her parents. They came. They tried to wake him up as well. They called for the medicine women of that village. It seemed he was in some kind of trance. What was going on? Was he sick? What was happening? Was he just a lazy teenager, or was it something more? They came. They sang their spells. They sang their magical music around him. They brought the plant medicine to him. They tried to awaken him in 1,000 different ways, but they failed. So the day went on, and he slept all that day. And then, when the sun went down, when the sun died at the edge of the sky, and night filled the world, even the spoons and the cups and the dark hollows of the forest and the stars came out, when that happened, then he awoke. "What happened?" he said. "You were sleeping," they all said. "You slept all day long. What is wrong with you?" Well, he did not know, and they did not know. And still that night, he ate a little bit, he talked with them, and then he slept again. As all humans sleep at night, he slept as well, even though he had slept all day. So the next day was the same. The sun rose and shone its light down into the world, but he slept on. All day he slept, and when that sun went down again on that night, he awoke. So it was, day after day. He seemed barely alive. He lived always in a trance, a dark sleep that shuddered through his bones and left him dead to the world. So no one could find a way to cure him. No medicine would work. So finally one day, his sister, this young woman, said to her parents, "Mother, Father, I am going to speak with the sun, for I feel that the sun himself has wisdom which can cure my brother." And they gave her their blessing. And her mother gave her a bag filled with bread and cheese and apples. And then this young woman went to the village, and she went to a shoemaker. and she asked him to make her some stone shoes. And he did this, and she put those stone shoes on her feet, and she said, I will not return until either these stone shoes wear out, or I find a way to heal my brother. And so she set out. And so she left her house. So she left that beautiful place where she had grown up. Her parents embraced her and cried tears at that parting, and off she went into the world. And so she went a long way, or a short way, but it was probably a long way, through the marshes and swamps of this world where the frogs speak in their secret codes, through the forests of this world that are shadowy and dark but also bright with light, through the meadows where the wind lashes itself backwards and forwards in the grass and the ladybugs crawl between the roots of that grass, through fields where the heat shimmers in the grain, she walked with those stone shoes on her feet. And finally, because this world is made of darkness and of light, because it is made of shadows and of brightness, of laughter and of sorrow, she came to a dark forest. And as often happens, she found herself in that forest with nowhere to spend the night. But far ahead, she saw a light. And around this light, there was a window. And as she went closer, she saw that around this window there was a wall, and around that wall there was a house. So she walked to the door of this house, and she knocked on that door. And an old woman came to the door and said, Good evening, young woman. And she said, Good evening, grandmother. I am coming, I am traveling. I wish to go speak with the sun, to find out how to cure my brother who has some sort of sleeping sickness. But I have nowhere to spend the night. May I spend the night here with you? Yes, my child, she said. All guests come from God, all wanderers especially. Come, be at home in our house. So it turned out the old woman lived there with an old man, and the young woman was welcomed into that house, and they fed her and nourished her with songs and stories, and then they took her to a room at the back of that house, and she lay down and went to sleep. But she did not sleep too well that night, for she heard groans and cries in the night, strange cries of pain out of the darkness. At one point she looked from her window of that little room, and in the moonlight she saw there was a round little house like a yurt off way a distance in the forest there. And there were women going to that house and backwards and forth. Some of them were carrying water. They seemed worried for sure. Well, morning came, the sun arose, and when that happened she thought of her brother back there at home in their house. And she thought to herself how he was not seeing that dawn, how he was most likely sound asleep. And then the old woman came, and she said, good morning, my child. Yes, how did you sleep? Not too well, she said. I heard cries and groans all night long. Ah, yes, she said, it's a horrible thing, a horrible thing. That is my daughter-in-law. She is pregnant and expecting a child. She has been in labor for 3 months. It is horrible. It's a horrible situation. 3 months. It's unbelievable. Yes, this story speaks about the possible with the impossible, and the language it uses to speak about that is 3 months and birth in a yurt at the edge of the forest there. So, yes, it's a horrible thing. She's been there for 3 months in labor. Well, said the young woman, I'm going to speak to the sun and learn some wisdom from him. Perhaps he knows a way that this can be solved. If he does, I will return and tell you that wisdom. That would be wonderful, said the old woman. And so the young woman said goodbye to the old woman and the old man and went out on her way. And so she walked through that forest, and she walked across the meadows and the swamps and the sandy deserts of this world, wearing her stone shoes. And after a while she came to a meadow, and in this meadow there was a sheep. And this meadow, all the grass had been eaten in that meadow. And the sheep had lots of wool around it on its body, but it looked very thin. It looked pale and anxious and worried, in fact. And she went to the sheep, and she said, "My dear sheep, what is the problem here?" And the sheep said, "Look over there. Look through this thorny hedge here." And there was a thorny hedge bordering that meadow. And the young woman looked through the hedge, and the sheep said, Look at all that luscious, delicious grass over there. And I can eat none of it. I am starving here in this meadow." "Why are you starving?" said the young woman. "Look at all my wool. There's no way I can fit through this hedge. If I try to squeeze through there, I will be stuck. I'll be caught like a rusty nail, like a barnacle on a boat, like something tangled up in rope. I will be snared forever inside this thorny hedge. There's no way I can get through. I would die inside that hedge. So I wait here in this meadow, every day getting weaker and thinner, and one day I will starve to death here in this meadow." "Well," the young woman said, "I'm going on a long journey to speak to the sun. And I'm going there because I wish to cure my brother, who sleeps all the time. He has a sleeping sickness. But I will ask the sun about your problem, and perhaps he will have some wisdom." "That would be wonderful," said the sheep. "If you find out anything, please tell me and heal me of this horrible problem I have." So the young woman left that sheep and set out across the world. Well, she went a long way, wearing those stone shoes. And finally, one day, she came to another dark forest. This one even more complicated than the other forest she'd been in. Like a strange puzzle made out of moss and water and darkness and the roots of old trees. Grandmother trees. So she journeyed into this forest, and she began to wonder, how will I ever reach the sun? The sun up there at the top of the sky. How will I get to the sun? It seems impossible. But then she came to a meadow. And in this meadow there was a stag. And this stag had antlers on its head, as stags do. But these were magnificent antlers. They branched and they branched again. They went up and up into the sky. They were the colors of old cheese and pale moonlight. They were like a vast and magnificent tree there on top of the head of the stag. These antlers went up, and then they vanished into the clouds. And the young woman approached the stag and said, "My dear stag, what's going on with your antlers? They're amazing, they're huge, they're gigantic." And the stag said, "Oh, yes, they are. They're also a serious problem. Look at me, I can't go anywhere. I've got these huge antlers, I can't enter the forest. I can't leave this very meadow. I've eaten all the grass here. I've eaten everything that is to be eaten in this meadow. I am going to starve in this meadow because of these antlers, which are magnificent, but they are killing me." "Well," said the young woman, "I am going to speak to the sun, because my brother has the sleeping sickness, and I wish to find a way to heal him. And I will talk to the sun, and perhaps he has some wisdom for you as well." "That would be wonderful," said the stag. "If you can heal me, that would be fantastic. But the thing is," said the young woman, "how am I to reach the sun? It seems impossible. How do you get to the sun? The sun's the center of the circle, and I'm at the outside. How do you climb up there? Only the birds, and not even they can do that." "Well," said the stag, "perhaps you could try climbing my antlers. I do not know where they end, but they are very tall. They are a curse to me. They are a deep problem for me, but perhaps for you they are also a blessing. So I will stand here, and you can try climbing my antlers." And so, with her stone shoes on her feet, she climbed up onto the back of that stag, the furry, warm, beautifully brown, chocolate-colored back of that stag. And then she took hold of those antlers, and she began to climb. Pale moonlight they seemed like, old cheese, marbled, beautiful, smooth, gnarly antlers. They went up and they went up. She was able to climb just as you would climb a tree. After a while she looked down. She saw down there the stag, the brown back of the stag, standing in the meadow. She saw the grasses around the stag. She saw the trees of that forest. She continued to climb. She went up higher. She went up past the realm of the trees. She could look down and see those trees far below. She climbed higher and higher. She climbed through the realm of the birds. They squawked and sang and cried around her. And then, as she climbed higher and higher, their songs became faint until she could no longer hear them. And then she entered the clouds. Picture it, a young woman wearing stone shoes, climbing on antlers through the clouds. All around her, fog and the blindness, the gray blindness, the sweet, cottony blindness of the clouds. Hand by hand, foot by foot, she ascended up into the sky. And then she came to the realm of the moon. And she kept climbing. Moonlight was on those antlers. Moonshine like laughter on those pearly, cheese-colored antlers. Higher and higher she went into the realm of the stars. Lit by starlight, with clouds far below her, she climbed hand over hand on those antlers. They clattered slightly. They blew a little bit in the high winds of those stars and those darknesses at the top of the universe. And then she climbed still higher. And then she came to some more clouds. Clouds like nothing she'd ever seen before. Luminous, bright, orange and pink clouds. And then she came to a stone step. And this step was sort of gray, but it shone within with hidden fire, flickering inside it. And there were more steps beyond it. And so she stepped from those antlers onto those stairs. And she climbed up some stairs. And then she came to a stone porch of sorts. And there was an old woman there, and she said, "Hey, what are you doing here? There's a human up here. No humans ever come this way. What are you doing up here, my dear girl?" And the young woman said, "My dear lady, I am here. I wish to speak to the sun, because my brother down on earth has the sleeping sickness. So I have come here to speak to the sun and learn some of his wisdom. For he sees all things as he looks down upon the earth, and surely he must have some medicine he can teach me, so I may heal my brother." And the old woman said, "Well, I'm the sun's mother, and he does not like having humans around, that's for sure. But I can see you've got a good heart, and I can find a way to help you, I think. Here, my child, come into the house. He's away. He'll be home soon, but he's away right now. I think we can find a way to help you out. You can stay for a while, but the thing is, I've got to turn you into a broom." Is that what the story says? Yes, that's what the story says. You can live in the sun's house for a while, but you have to be a broom. So the old woman grabbed hold of the young woman's hand, and she lifted it up so her arm was outstretched, and she squeezed that hand, and as she did so, the hair of the young woman got longer and drier and more crackly like straw, and her body got thinner and more woodsy, and she looked down at the dust on the floor, and it suddenly seemed such a delicious thing to be able to sweep the dust back and forward. She longed to do that, and boom, just like that, she was a broom. And the old woman swept a little bit in the corners of that room, and then put the broom in the corner. And then a little while later, the son came home. And his mother was there, and she said, "Ah, dear, come on in. I've got some dinner for you." And she put down a plate before him, and the son began to eat. And the son ate the food, and the old woman said, "Ah, my son, how's it going? I'm kind of bored up here, I've been up here all day. You get all the excitement out there. You get to see lots of things. I'm getting kind of curious. Can you tell me how things are going down on Earth? What's going on over there?" And the son said, "Well, I see a lot of things. I see a lot of strange things. There's humans down there. I don't know if you want to hear about them. They do a lot of dumb things." "Humans?" she said. "What do they do? Do they get tied up in knots or what?" Well, the son said, "They get tied up in all kinds of knots, most definitely. Why, just a couple weeks ago, there's a young man down there. And it was a beautiful day. The clouds were out. There was just a fine layer of clouds. A perfect day for me to send light across the world to the moon, who I love so dearly. I was going to send my light over there. But this young man, he was shooting arrows this way and that way. He was killing animals in many different ways, causing a big ruckus down there. So I just had to put him to sleep to get some quiet." "Oh, that's crazy," said the old woman. So what's going on? Is he going to sleep forever or what?" "Well, he doesn't have to sleep forever. I mean, not really. All he's got to do is spend 17 days in a room completely blocked out from any of my light. If he can be in a dark room where I cannot enter in any way for 17 days, well, then he'll be fine and he'll wake up and everything is fine. But they'll never figure that out." "Oh, interesting," said the old woman. "Dog, broom, and cat. Did you ever hear that?" she said. And she grabbed the broom and began sweeping in the corners of the room. And then she said, "Well, tell me, do other humans get into troubles like this?" "Oh, most definitely," said the son. Yes. I mean, there's a woman down there, a young woman. She's pregnant. She's in labor. And she's been in labor for 3 months. The poor woman trying to give birth to a baby. But that child, it's just not coming. It's not happening." "Well, what has she got to do?" said the son's mother. Well, the son said, "It's not that hard. She's just got to sleep on a hard wooden floor for a couple nights. And then it'll be easy. It'll be just like a raindrop falling off a leaf and that child will come." "Amazing," said the old woman. "Wow, bing, bang, boom. I'll remember that until June." And she got the broom out and she started sweeping in more corners of that room. And then she said, "Well, tell me about the animals. I mean, do they have problems too, or is it just humans?" "Oh, the animals have their share of problems, most definitely," said the son. "I mean, there's a sheep down there that's so fat with wool that he's just stuck in a meadow and can't squeeze through this thorny hedge to get to the grass on the other side. This sheep is just going to starve in this meadow for sure. I'm sure that's going to happen." "Well, is there any way to avoid that?" said the son's mother. "Well, I mean, sure. The sheep just has to rub its body against the thorns on one side and then the other side. It's very simple. The sheep just needs a haircut, basically, and then it'll slip and squeeze right through that thorny hedge like a needle through cloth and get to the delicious grass on the other side. It's really not a big deal." "Well, that's amazing," said the old woman. "I never knew there were such crazy problems down there. Anything else happening down there?" "Oh, yeah," said the son. "Well, there's also this stag that's got these antlers, which you just wouldn't believe. I mean, they're just huge. It's like beyond trees. It's just trees upon trees of antlers on his head. So he's just stuck there. He can't move at all, basically. He's just excruciating situation. He can't go anywhere. He's going to starve as well in that meadow down there." "Well, is there any remedy for this?" said the old woman. "Is there any remedy?" And the son said, "Oh, sure. Well, that stag, I mean, he doesn't know this, but in the corner of that meadow, there is a secret spring under the grass, the northwest corner. All that stag has to do is to go to that corner and press his hoof down into the wet soil there. And then the water will fill up that hoof print. And then very carefully, the stag needs to drink that water. As soon as the stag does that, those antlers will just break and fall off into the forest in no time, and everything will be fine. That's all the stag needs to do." "That's amazing," said the son's mother, and picked up the broom, and she began sweeping in other corners of the room there. "That's amazing. I never knew there were such interesting problems down there on the earth." Yeah. Well, ask me tomorrow, and I can tell you 10 more problems like that, because there's just a lot going on down there on the earth. But as you know, I get up very early, so, my dear mother, I'm going to go sleep. Thanks for the food. It was delicious." "No problem, my dear son. See you later. Good night." So the son went off down a hallway to go to bed. And then the old woman took hold of the broom once more, and she swept around in the corners of that room. And then she squeezed the top of that broom, and it became the young woman's hand. And the straw of that broom became her hair. And once again she remembered herself, her knees, her shoulders, her eyes, her nose, her feet. Every human part of her was once again there, and she was a young woman once again. "Did you hear all that?" said the son's mother. "Yes, I did," said the young woman. "I did. Thank you so much. I will remember these secrets. I will keep them in my heart, and I will help everyone I can down on earth." "You do that, my dear girl. You do that. Now take care getting down from this high place." "I will," she said. And so the young woman left the house of the sun and walked down the stairs, which were luminous, lit from within by flames in golden light. And then there were the antlers, clattering a little bit, pearly white antlers like the branches of a strange and magnificent tree. And carefully she took hold of those antlers, and still wearing her stone shoes, she stepped out onto those antlers and began to climb down. Down she climbed, hand over hand, foot over foot. Climbing down those beautiful, smooth, pearly antlers. She climbed down through the clouds and into the realm of the stars. And the starlight lit up those antlers, and it shone in her eyes as she descended from the house of the sun. And then she came to the realm of the moon, and the moonlight illuminated her and all around her. And far below she could see clouds. She could see the earth like a bowl at the bottom of the sky. Carefully, carefully she climbed down those clattering, whispery antlers, beautiful antlers. And soon she came to the realm of the clouds. And she climbed through those foggy, beautifully cottony clouds. With their light all around her, the white light of the sun reflected in those clouds. And then she heard birds singing, the birds of earth singing and crying out in the sky. So carefully she climbed down through the realm of the birds. And then she looked down, and she saw the back of the stag, the warm, brown, chocolatey back of that stag, where those antlers were rooted in the head of that stag. And so she climbed down carefully, carefully onto the back of that stag, and then she put her feet down on the earth. And the stag said, "Ah, young woman, I'm so glad you're back. Welcome back to the earth. Tell me, did you find the sun? Did you learn anything up there?" And she said, "Yes, I did. I spoke with the sun, and he had wisdom for us about many things. And for you in particular, the sun said, all you must do is go to the northwest corner of this meadow and press your hoof down into the wet soil there, for there is a secret spring beneath the ground there, and wait until the water fills up that hoof print, and then drink that water. And as soon as you do that, these tremendous, magnificent antlers will fall and break off and fall into the forest and be gone, and you will be free." "That's wonderful," said the stag. "I will do that right away." So carefully, with these huge antlers on his head, he walked towards the northwest corner of that meadow. And then carefully he pressed his hoof down into the wet earth there. And water soon filled it up, for water is generous, it gives, it seeks the lowest shadowy place. Without asking any questions, the water filled up that hoof print. And carefully the stag bent down with that huge rack of antlers on its head. It bent down and it sipped and drank the water from that hoof print, and the water went into its body. And suddenly there was a great crack far off, and the antlers fell tumbling down into the forest to break apart and be eaten by mice for 1,000 years in that forest. And the stag was very happy. He jumped and ran around. He took his head and he rubbed it in the grass so happily. And then he said, "Thank you, young woman. Thank you. I am free." And he ran off into the woods and was gone. And the young woman said, "You're welcome, stag. You are welcome." And then, with the stone shoes on her feet, she began to walk. And she walked across the forest of this world. She walked over the deserts of this world, where the sand talks in endless equations to itself about heat and about light. And she saw beetles and dragonflies and villages with water wheels. She walked a long way. And finally she came back to the meadow where she had found the thin sheep before. And this sheep was still there, covered in wool, but very worried, anxious, looking pale, a pale sheep. And the sheep said, "Young woman, have you returned from the land of the sun? Have you spoken to the sun? Did you learn anything up there? Do you have some medicine to bring to us here on the earth?" And the young woman said, "Yes, I did. I did speak with the sun. I made friends with the sun's mother after climbing up the antlers of a stag all the way to the house of the sun at the top of the sky. And I spoke with the sun's mother, and I heard what the sun said and gave medicine to us. And the medicine I have for you is this. What you must do is very simple. You must simply rub your body against the thorns of this hedge, first the left side and then the right side. That will clean off the wool from your body, and then you will fit through this hedge very easily, like a needle through cloth. That is all you must do." "That's wonderful," said the sheep. "Wonderful. I will try that." So the sheep rubbed itself along one side and then the other side, and much of its wool came off like little clouds there in the thorns of that hedge. And then the sheep slipped through that hedge and through to the other side where there was a meadow of delicious grass. I know we are humans hearing this story. We don't think of grass as delicious, but take that sheep part of yourself and imagine how grass can be delicious. So this grass was delicious, and that sheep tore up mouthfuls of that grass, and it was very happy. "This is delicious," it said. "Thank you, my dear woman. Thank you, thank you." "You are welcome," said the young woman. And then, with the stone shoes on her feet, she set out across the world. And she voyaged for a long time through the marshes and the swamps of this world, across the deserts and through the dark forests. And she came once again to the dark forest where she had been before. She came once again to the light that was inside a window, inside a house with a yurt in back, a round house where there was a woman crying and groaning. And this young woman knocked on the door, and again the old woman came to the door and said, "Ah, my dear, you've returned. Did you make it to the sun? Have you any wisdom for us?" And the young woman said, "Yes, I walked for a long way. I climbed up the antlers of a stag, up through the clouds to the house of the sun. I made friends with the mother of the sun and overheard much wisdom. And the wisdom I have for you is this. Your daughter-in-law, well, she can give birth. All she has to do is lie down and sleep on a hard wooden floor for a few nights. If she does that, the child will come easily, like a raindrop trickling off a green leaf in the springtime." "That's wonderful," said the old woman. "We will do that at once." So they did that, and her daughter-in-law slept on a hard wooden floor for 3 nights. And on the 3rd night, in the darkest pit of that night, she gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. And everyone there was very happy, and there was a celebration, and there was joy and delight in that place. And they all said, thank you, my dear young woman, for bringing us this wisdom." "You are welcome," she said. And then, with those stone shoes on her feet, she set out back home. How long had she been gone? Months? Years? Time in a story like this is a valley, and it is a mountain, and it is a wide desert, and each sand grain is a century, and each sand grain is an instant, a second of this beautiful life in which we live and breathe and talk and tell stories. So, after a time, she returned to the forest that she knew so well. She returned to the house where her mother, her father, and her dear brother lived. And they welcomed her back, and they cried tears of joy and embraced her, so glad to see her home again. And they said, "My dear girl, my dear daughter, did you learn anything? Did you speak to the sun? Have you any wisdom for us?" And she said, "Yes, I do. I traveled a long way. I climbed up the antlers of a stag up to the house of the sun. I became friends with the sun's mother, and I overheard much wisdom that will help us and help my dear brother. What we must do is this. He simply has to sleep in a room for 17 days, a room that is completely blacked out, so no light from the sun can enter there in any way. Not even a single tiny needle-thin beam of light can enter that room. If we do that for 17 days, he will awake. So let us do this at once," they said. So they did. And they found a room of their house, and they blacked it out with sheepskins and deer skins and all kinds of skins, and they made it really dark in there. And then they took her brother, and they carried him from his bedroom into that room. They carried his body, which was filled with the knowledge of the forest, filled with the rhythms of the moon and the sun, with the music of the squirrels and the rabbits and the birds and the deer and the bobcat and the bear. his body, which was so attuned and filled with knowledge and wisdom of that forest, but was out cold, in a trance, sleeping like stone. They carried him, silent and stone-like, from his bedroom into that room they had prepared. And they laid him down on a bed there. And then, after making sure that all the windows were blocked, they closed the door. And his sister, well, she waited outside that door. She kept a vigil there. She slept outside that door. She slept there at night, and during the day she waited to make sure that no one would accidentally come in and open that door, looking for a hatchet they'd lost, or looking for an old sock they were looking for, or just accidentally opening that door. She was there guarding that door, and she guarded that door for 17 days. And who knows how the equations of this world are solved? Who knows how the recipes are baked? How the special medicines come to us? Who knows how healing happens? And what is required for that strange alchemy which takes illness and turns it into health? But day by day she waited outside that room. But finally, it was almost the time. And she waited there. It was the afternoon of the 17th day. And she fell asleep, slumped against the door there in the afternoon, worn out by all the care and all the trouble of looking after this room and making sure no one had entered, all the worry she had for her dear brother. She fell asleep. And then she was awoken by the sound of a door opening. And she said, oh no, her first thought was, oh my, somebody has opened this door. Some fool has opened this door and ruined all the magic. But she looked, and the door was being opened from the inside. And it was her brother. And he was blinking at the light, and he said, my dear sister, where am I? What has happened? And she said, my brother, you have been asleep. That is all. And she wept to see him walking and talking in the daytime. And then hand in hand they walked out into the forest. The sun was coming up. It was a new day. The birds were singing their songs, and the light of the sun was there in the leaves of the trees, and it was shining on the ladybugs in the grasses, and it was sparkling in the river, and it was singing in the voices of the birds, and it was illuminating all things. And her brother saw all these things, and he was not asleep. It was not a dream. He was not locked up in a charcoal blackness, in shadows and darkness, but he was wide awake. And his sister gave thanks for his life, that he could breathe and be alive and speak and talk and see all of these things. And he gave thanks for his dear sister. And then she looked at her stone shoes. And they were not worn through, but they were kind of beat up, it is true. One of them was missing a toe. The other one was worn so thin you could hold it up and you could see the sunlight through that stone shoe. And a few days later, she buried those stone shoes in the dirt and gave thanks for those shoes which had carried her so far. And she gave thanks for the sun and its light. And she gave thanks for the darkness as well, and its beautiful secrets. And if that family has not died, they are still alive. And it seems clear that they lived for many years in happiness and harmony in that beautiful forest.